The fourth dawn, when consciousness judges itself. A philosophical lecture inspired by the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Ladies and gentlemen, when we speak of death in the modern Western world, we often imagine an ending, a biological shutdown, a neurological silence, a final blackout. But the ancient wisdom of the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers a radically different proposition. Death, it tells us, is not an extinction. It is an exposure. What unfolds after the body falls silent is not judgment imposed from above, but consciousness confronting itself without disguise. Today we enter what the text describes as the fourth dawn after death. The moment when the blue light appears. This is not mythology in the childish sense. It is a precise psychological and philosophical map of what happens when the ego collapses and awareness is left alone with its own truth. The blue light, the terror of absolute clarity. On the fourth dawn, the scriptures say, a blue radiance rises from the east. But do not imagine a literal direction. For the dead, orientation no longer exists. There is no east or west, no above or below. The east here is symbolic. It is the direction of origin, the source from which consciousness itself arises. The blue light is described as overwhelming, brilliant, vast like an ocean. And this detail is essential because truth, when fully revealed, is rarely comforting. The blue light represents total clarity, unfiltered awareness, free from self-deception, narrative, and defense mechanisms. In Jungian terms, it is the self confronting the ego. In Platonic language, it is the soul, glimpsing the realm of forms without shadows. In existential philosophy, it is being exposed to being itself. And here is the crucial insight. The dead do not fear punishment. They fear seeing clearly. This is why the text repeats the warning. Do not be afraid. This light is your own mind. Because most beings, when faced with complete self-knowledge, recoil. Memory as an ocean, not a courtroom. As the blue radiance expands, it transforms into something else. Not a beam, not a flame, but a sea. Within it arise memory, not in sequence, not as a moral ledger, but as waves, faces once loved, moments of cruelty long rationalized, unspoken resentments, acts of cowardice disguised as prudence. Notice the structure here. There is no judge pointing a finger. The consciousness judges itself simply by remembering without distortion. This is deeply unsettling for Western audiences, accustomed to moral systems based on external authority. But the Tibetan insight is sharper. Suffering arises not from being judged, but from being unable to deny. In life, we soften our memories. We reframe our failures. We justify our betrayals. In death, that luxury disappears. The blue ocean does not accuse, it reflects. And reflection, when total, can feel unbearable. Why we turn away from truth. The text tells us something uncomfortable, but profoundly human. Most beings turn away from the blue light, not because it is evil, but because it is too honest. Instead, another light appears, soft, gray, dim, comforting. It feels safe. It whispers reassurance. It promises rest. This is the moment of greatest danger. The scriptures name this light as the shadow of desire, aversion, and ignorance. Not demons, but habits of mind. In psychological terms, this is regression, the retreat into familiar narratives, the longing for numbness over clarity. In philosophical terms, this is what Heidegger called fallenness, the escape from authentic being into the comfort of distraction. The tragedy is not that beings choose darkness. It is that they mistake comfort for safety. And so the blue light fades not because it leaves, but because the consciousness refuses to face it. No external God, no external punishment. At this point, The text delivers its most radical claim, one that dismantles centuries of moral, fear-based theology. The priest's voice declares, "All that you have seen, the light and the shadow, arose from your own mind." There is no external deity here, no cosmic courtroom, no divine executioner. Your light is your wisdom. Your shadow is your ignorance. This is not moral relativism. It is moral interiority. The terrifying implication is this: you cannot escape responsibility by blaming God's fate or society. And the liberating implication is equally clear. You are not condemned by anything outside yourself. Judgment is not imposed. It is recognized. The moment of recognition, when this realization strikes, the dead weep. But these are not tears of regret. They are flames. The text describes blue fire flowing from the heart, a symbol of transformation through insight. This is the moment when consciousness understands. The light I feared was my own compassion. The shadow I chased was my own refusal to see. In modern terms, this is radical self-integration, the collapse of the false self, the end of projection, the acceptance of responsibility without self-hatred. And here the text offers something astonishing. Even at this late stage, recognition brings freedom, not forgiveness from above, but release through understanding. The wind of compassion. Finally, the blue light no longer stands before the consciousness. It enters it. Breath becomes light. Light becomes awareness. The boundary between life and death dissolves, and the final truth emerges. Death did not reveal something new. It removed what was false. The fourth dawn is not about dying. It is about seeing. And this, perhaps, is the most unsettling lesson for the living. Every day, in small ways, we stand before the same blue light. Every time we avoid self-honesty. Every time we choose comfort over truth. Every time we mistake numbness for peace. The afterlife described in this text is not waiting somewhere beyond us. It is rehearsed within us every single day. If this reflection resonated with you, I invite you to walk further into this inquiry. This channel explores the Tibetan Book of the Dead, not as religion, but as a map of consciousness, identity, and liberation. Subscribe not as a habit, but as a commitment to clarity, because the blue light does not appear only at death. It appears whenever we are brave enough to truly look. The fourth night. Why the light does not disappear. A philosophical reflection on consciousness and the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Ladies and gentlemen, as the fourth day after death comes to an end, the Tibetan Book of the Dead tells us that night falls once again. In ordinary human experience, night is a time of fear. It is the absence of form, the disappearance of boundaries, the moment when familiar reference points dissolve. And yet, at this precise moment, the text speaks words that are both unsettling and profoundly compassionate. Even when night descends, do not be afraid. The blue light does not disappear. This sentence alone overturns much of what modern people assume about death, identity, and consciousness. Because what it suggests is this: darkness does not negate awareness. Silence does not extinguish meaning. And the loss of form does not imply the loss of truth. The blue light as philosophical symbol. In Western philosophical language, the blue light is not a supernatural spectacle. It is a symbol for primordial awareness, consciousness, prior to judgment, prior to narrative, prior to division. In Tibetan Buddhism, this is called the original purity of mind. In Western terms, we might call it awareness before ego, perception before interpretation, being before identity. The text associates this blue light with what is known as mirror-like wisdom. A mirror does not choose what it reflects. It does not distort. It does not cling or reject. It simply reveals. This is why the blue light is terrifying to many. Not because it is violent, but because it is unavoidable. It shows things exactly as they are. Why truth feels like fear. The text makes a psychologically precise observation. Those whose lives were dominated by attachment, anger, and ignorance experience the blue light as overwhelming. They describe it as too bright, too intense, too consuming. Why? Because a mind trained in avoidance experiences clarity as annihilation. Modern psychology confirms this insight. The ego survives by filtering reality, by softening memory, justifying desire, and editing guilt. But the blue light offers no such mercy. It does not punish. It does not accuse. It simply removes the filters. And for a consciousness accustomed to darkness, clarity feels like exposure. This is why the monk's voice repeats the instruction. Do not be afraid. This blue light is your own original mind. The terror arises not from the light, but from recognition. The light does not disappear. One of the most radical lines in the entire text is this: the blue light does not disappear. This is not poetic reassurance. It is a metaphysical claim. It means that awareness itself is not produced by conditions, and therefore cannot be destroyed by their collapse. Bodies dissolve. Personal histories fragment. Names and roles fall away. But the capacity to know, to be aware, remains. In Tibetan thought, this is called original purity. In Western philosophy, it resonates with the idea that truth is not created, only uncovered. The implication is immense. Even in death, even in confusion, even in fear, the possibility of awakening remains. This is not optimism. It is responsibility. The heart as the center of awareness. The text continues with an image that is deeply foreign to modern materialism. When you close your eyes, the light will rise again from the center of your heart. This does not refer to emotion in the sentimental sense. The heart here is the symbolic center of consciousness, the place where awareness and vitality converge. Even as perception collapses, the text claims that a subtle continuity remains. Not thought, not memory, but presence. From this center, the blue light emerges again, not as something external, but as the very fact of being aware. To recognize it is liberation. To miss it is to continue wandering. Death as the final self-encounter. At this stage, the dead realize something unsettling. There has never been an external judge. No God delivering sentences. No cosmic tribunal weighing sins. Every fear, every light, every shadow has arisen from within. The blue light is not salvation from elsewhere. It is the self seen without distortion. And this is the hardest truth of all. We are not punished for our darkness. We are trapped by our refusal to see. The return of night without fear. As darkness returns, something changes. This time, it is no longer threatening. Within the dead, a subtle movement arises. Not the last breath, but the beginning of recognition. The text tells us that this moment is not reserved for the dead. The blue light is not a post-mortem phenomenon. It appears when we tell the truth we have been avoiding, when we stop defending an identity that no longer fits, when we face ourselves without narration. Some encounter it in death, others in love, others in loss. But the structure is the same, the teaching for the living. The Tibetan Book of the Dead does not teach us to romanticize death. It teaches us something far more demanding. Do not abandon yourself, even when fear arises. Do not flee clarity, even when it feels unbearable, because the light you are avoiding is the very ground of your freedom. Thank you for walking this path together. This channel explores death not as an ending, but as a mirror held up to life. If this reflection resonated with you, I invite you to continue this inquiry. Subscribing is not about content. It is about commitment to awareness, to honesty, to inner clarity. In our next lecture, we will enter the 5th day after death, the appearance of the red light of judgment. Until then, rest quietly. And in the afterglow of the blue light, dare to look inward.